This is the Plasma Etch Windows-based program. This has just been started up. We always, when we first come on up here, we initialize the power, RF generator power, vacuum power. This is a one-time deal. Doesn't have to be initialized anymore once you start the program. This is the main screen, which displays all process monitoring, your gas flows, running vacuum, RF power, RF reflected, plasma time, elapsed time, status of the door, current step that the system is in, currently pulled up sequence that will be run, and then some other statuses here for system power. Up above are all the menus. Far left is a technician menu. This is where you would create your sequences. Currently it's set with a password. That can be disabled if needed. To create a sequence, you can either load an existing one and edit it, or you can clear it and start from scratch and enter your new sequence. Right here's the process time. We'll select 5 minutes. RF power in watts. We'll put in 100 watts. Gas flow 1 would go through MFC channel 1, and you have up to 5 gases you can select from, pre-programmed gases. We'll just do a simple oxygen process. Set the flow to 50 cc's. This would just be the first step of the cycle. We can program up to 3 cycle steps if needed. Currently it's configured for 2 cycle steps. This particular sequence we will just do 1 cycle for explanation purposes. You can save that. You can either overwrite an existing recipe or create your own recipe name. We'll call this O2 test. We'll overwrite the existing one we had on here. So that sequence is saved onto the disk. And over here you can load that up. It'll ask you to confirm it, and that'll display it up here on the main screen. O2 test, 5 minutes, 100 watts RF, 50 cc's of oxygen. Currently the system's in standby. Most likely that's where it will start up. The chamber will be under vacuum, so we'll go ahead and cycle off to simulate you loading the system up with material. Once it fully vents, the door will open. You can go ahead and load up your materials to be processed. I'm just going to go in here and close the door. I'll have to simulate that here. Commands menu. Start the plasma sequence. It'll ask you to confirm. Select yes. It'll pump the chamber down to a vacuum set point. You'll see the vacuum display here as it pumps down. Plasma vacuums the step, and it's waiting for the vacuum set point, so it displays what step you're in here. Below is current events that occurred. You can click on that to expand it out and display all events. We'll go over that shortly once. We're just going to show the main screen process running. It hits its set point of 200 millitorr, which is programmable. Goes through some delays and it starts the process sequence. Shows you the step. It's in the plasma sequence step 1. Currently it has an oxygen low flow alarm. And it'll have a pop-up screen to show you there's an alarm, and it also displays that alarm in the events. And that is stored on disk as well. You can see that there's our currently running sequence and the oxygen alarm. Once it achieves within its set point range, close to 50 cc's, it'll clear the alarm, as you can see down below here. Right now it's complaining because the RF hasn't achieved its 100 watts set point. The display will be shown in red if there's a monitoring that's out of range. Plasma times, countdown timer for the current sequence time you have in there. It's already ran for a minute and a half roughly. And as the elapsed time shows, it'll display the whole pump down time from the starting of the sequence to the end. In the event screen, you can see that we have the O2 test sequence for running, the date and time it started. It gives us an ID number for later referencing for pulling up reports. Tells you when it started, gives you a time and date stamp, and it shows the alarms that have occurred during that process run. Sequences. Configuration is where you can set up your gas menus. Right now this is a 2x5 gas system, so you can pre-program 5 gases. These will be plumbed up to the rear of the system, and you can select from any 2 of these 5 gases for the 2 MFC unit. Timers, you can set gas stabilization timers, purge vents timers, atmospheric vent. You can set delays between steps for multi-step processes. This is where you configure RF alarm percentage. You can choose if you want to display the reflective power or not. This is where you'd set up your MFC ranges and the type of MFC that is in the system hardware-wise, and then also the vacuum range for the type of vacuum sensor you have. Emergency off, you can change the logic on the emergency switch. Miscellaneous information, vacuum set point is where you'd set in the cut-in pressure for the process. You can choose to have the system automatically bleed off the chamber at the end of the cycle or not. If it's selected to no, you would be prompted to cycle the system off. Chamber purge, some sequences where you're not running a noxious gas, you can skip the chamber purge for speeding up the process. You can set up some vacuum ranges for alarming. Most gas flow and RF flow alarms will just be a warning. You can select stop on process errors, which will actually end the process sequence if there's any kind of a flow issue or RF issue. Default sequence, every time you boot up the program, it'll always start up with a default sequence. You can edit that. For some companies have a repetitive process they run a lot, so they don't really need to choose a sequence, so they have a default. Shift times, or you can actually have reports for different portions of different shifts and tells you which processes have been running. Other data. This is all configuration information. That shouldn't have to be edited that much. It's just a one-time configuration, but you can change it as needed. Password functions, you can allow different portions of the menus to be password protected. You got up to 9 levels of password information. Currently we have a sequence editing set as level 1 password. As you can see, when we want to go into sequence editing, it forces you to enter a password. That function can be disabled by selecting the none column, and you can have free reign of all the menus. I can allow configuration editing, select level 1, save it, and it requires me to set a password to get into that configuration. So you have up to 9 levels of password protection for the various menu items. You can create users Usernames and passwords is all configured up here in this menu. You can select a maintain a password logon, which will allow you not to have to re-enter the password every time you go back into that menu item. And you can do that by logging on, test, password, check password. And it displays here that user test is logged on in the event screen. And you can see I can go into the sequence configuration screen because I'm logged on. That's pretty much with the technician menu. Power menu has already been initialized. It's a one-time deal when you first turn on the program. Once you initialize the power, you don't have to do that until you restart the application again. Commands menu, plasma starts the plasma cycle. Cycle off will vent the chamber. Standby just puts you into standby mode, keeps the chamber under vacuum. Shutdown is when you want to shut down the system. It has a timer where it'll allows the components to cool before you shut the system power down. Silence alarm, you can choose to silence the alarm at any time. Plasma time, you can change the run time plasma at any time, and quick stop will end the cycle. Sequences or any saved sequence, you can just load them up here. Pulls it up and displays it in the process sequence column. So any saved sequence will be displayed here. Trend screen displays all the current monitoring values such as gas flow, RF power, vacuum, temperature if you have that. Real time is what is displayed when you first turn on the trend screen. You can drag around portions of the screen. The bottom is the timeline. To the left is the scale of the various parameters for the gas flow, RF, vacuum. The left mouse button, you can actually zoom in and get a closer look at the graph. To the right, you can disable certain portions of the graph for clarity if you want to focus on a certain parameter. Here we're looking at the RF power, but solely by itself. You can clear it and display them all. You can change the range of the time value to stretch out your data. You can choose various ranges of the trend. And you have historical files which are saved on the hard drive based upon the date and the run number of that date. You can choose to load them up and it will display that current process that was run. You can also export those to a file, and there's options to print the graph too if a printer is enabled. Event screen. All the events that have occurred for that particular day are displayed here. Date and time stamp displays when the cycle started, any alarms that were initiated and cleared, gives you a date time stamp. This is saved on the hard drive as well. You can have various reports, run report. You can put in the sort ID for a particular run. And it'll display all the events associated with that particular run. And if a printer is enabled, you can actually print this out too. Also at the end of cycle, you can automatically have it print to a printer all the run data events for that particular run. Run list report shows what runs were ran, percentage complete. If if it didn't complete the whole cycle, it'll display it here. How many times the runs were started, how many runs were completed. If a run was prematurely quit before the timer expired, it'll tell you that it was not complete. And here's the recipe names and when the first run ran and the last time it was actually executed. You can export that data as well and print it as well. And this is shift data. You can create various shifts and it'll show you which runs and sort ID were run during a particular shift, start time and the end time. Summary just displays it in another, how many runs were ran per shift. You can export that data as well and print it too. Calendar, where you can display the calendar and choose different events for a particular day and then repeat the same report information for that day. I/O screen displays all the status of all the discrete I/O outputs out of the PLC or controller. All the inputs, outputs, analog inputs and analog outputs as well. You can actually force these functions on and off for testing. Force outputs, if you suspect a faulty output, you can actually force it on and off, independent of the running program. So it's a good tool for maintenance people to check out a particular output. You can force it on, shows you that it's forced on, force off, you can shut it off. Unforce would remove the forcing capability for that particular output. Communications, this displays the communication packets to the controller. We're not connected up to a controller at this point, so it's going to just show a bad communication, but you can actually display the communication of the controller there for troubleshooting purposes. Analog values can be forced on or off as well. And you can ramp them up to the full scale of the control capability. Maintenance, you can set a maintenance milestone timer in hours. Once those hours have elapsed, it'll flash up an alarm for changing oil on a pump or whatever maintenance milestone you want to change. Screensaver is basically what it is. About screen just displays parameters of the program, build time, and software version. Alarm screen just displays possible events, any events that are programmed, and will display a time that it has occurred, and it will highlight in red if it's active at the current time. This just displays all possible events. You can sort them if needed.